Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And we're continuing with our literature unit as we head toward the end of the month of November here. The featured work of literature for this month is Moby Dick by Herman Melville. It's a story about hunting a whale, but it's also about obsession and things like that. And we'll talk about some of the themes and ideas in this novel in our next program. But today, as promised, we're going to talk about the author himself, Herman Melville.
That's right. It's our bio section of the 3-day literature unit, where we find out a little bit about the author's background. Herman Melville. To be honest, I haven't read any of his books. Moby Dick is his masterpiece, which helps us learn a lot about how revenge can really ruin your own life if you let it. But yeah, he's got some other books, and we'll talk about when he lived. I think he lived in a really exciting time in world history when, the Industrial Revolution was happening. People were coming up with new ways to produce things. We had factories and machines and trains that were new. Kind of a fun era. Let's get started, guys. I'm going to read through today's unit and then we'll be back. Moby Dick, or The Whale, was written by American author Herman Melville. In it, he drew on both his own experiences and the stories he heard in his youth. Born in New York City in 1819, Melville received a good education and started writing. However, he couldn't sell his work and went to sea in a merchant ship instead. Later, he worked on the whaling vessel Acushnet and saw the world. On one of these voyages, he heard the story of the Essex, a ship that had been destroyed by a whale. He also heard about Mocha Dick, a giant white sperm whale. After 18 months, Melville, struggling with being at sea for so long, jumped ship and lived in the Polynesian Islands. He spent several months there, learning about the local cultures and seeing Western civilization from an outsider's point of view. Upon his return to the U.S., he wrote stories based on his experiences. His first book, Typee, was a partly fictional account of his time on the islands. It was followed by further successes that established Melville among the leading literary figures of his time. Moby Dick was published in 1851, but this ambitious novel wasn't well received at the time. Melville entered a difficult period that saw him give up prose and write poetry instead. He had to get a job as a customs inspector to make ends meet. When he passed away at the age of 72, he was thought of merely as a good writer, not a great one. However, in 1919, a century after his birth, others began to reevaluate his works. Moby Dick was praised as a masterpiece, and Melville is now considered to be one of the great American writers.
Let's get to it. Let's talk about the second day of our article, November 27th, and Moby Dick is our featured novel. So Moby Dick, or The Whale, which is also known as, was written by American author Herman Melville. And in this book, he drew on both his own experiences and the stories he heard in his youth. So we've got this phrase here, to draw on something. That could mean literally, if you take a pencil or a pen or something and you start drawing pictures on paper, you're drawing on paper there. But in this particular case, it just means he used this as the basis for his story. Okay, he used this information to write a story. Maybe he thought he could use one particular story when he was 10 years old and change it a little bit, or maybe change some names or something like that. So he basically based this book on his own experiences, but he also based the book on stories that he heard from other people. So he kind of wove them all together as if he was making a sweater or something like that, and made something totally new based on other things.
So let's talk about when he was born. He was born way back in 1819 in New York City, and he received a good education, which tells us he probably was born into a family that had at least some money, and he started writing. You need a good education if you want to be a writer, because you need to know how to write and how to critique or analyze other people's writing. So, yeah, he had a good education. He was one of the lucky ones. However, he couldn't sell his work. That often happened back then, remember? A lot of painters and artists, writers, musicians even, composers, they often would produce beautiful pieces of work, which would later be declared to be masterpieces. But while they were alive, they just couldn't get enough publicity. They couldn't sell enough. And so a lot of them either died young, poor, or maybe they had to start doing something else instead of focus on their art. What did he do? Well, he needed to make a living. And he wasn't making money selling his books, so he went to sea in a merchant ship instead. A merchant is someone who trades with other people. So a merchant ship would be a big ship that would take a lot of goods from one place, one country, one city, and then sail across the ocean and sell it to another place. It might be from America over to Europe, or maybe they went to Asia or Russia, who knows. But he worked on a merchant ship as a sailor. That's hard work.
Yeah, nowadays, of course, people would work on container vessels, which pretty much do that. Those big ships that sail out of Geelong or Kaohsiung harbors and head off to different places in the world. I guess you could call those merchant ships with, things for sale on there. And so later he worked on the whaling vessel Acushnet and saw the world. So he got some experience working on a merchant ship. He thought it was pretty cool. He probably got over seasickness and was able to sail on the ocean blue. So he got work on another kind of boat. In this particular case, it was a whaling vessel. A vessel is usually some kind of ship that sails on the ocean, but it could also be something that flies in space, I suppose.
Yeah.
So in this particular case, it's just a different kind of ship here. This is a whaling ship which actually goes out and hunts whales. Whales can be processed into meat and oil and stuff like that. Some countries still do that, like Norway, I guess, still goes out in whaling vessels and kills whales and stuff like that. I guess they're going to start doing that now in Japan, too.
So on one of these voyages he was on, he heard the story of the Essex. I'm sure the sailors would sit around and talk about their past experiences on different types of ships and what happened to them. Well, he heard this story of a ship called the Essex, and it had been destroyed by a whale. So it sounds like the ideas for Moby Dick came from his experience as a merchant sailor. He also heard about Mocha Dick, not Moby, Mocha Dick. So he kind of changed that name. Mocha nowadays has something to do with a dark flavored coffee. Mocha flavored ice cream. Yeah, coffee flavored ice cream. But this was a giant white sperm whale, Mocha Dick. It was real. But he based his Moby Dick on this particular whale story he had heard.
As you know, there are many different kinds of whales, the sperm whale, humpback whales, blue whales, etc., the bowhead, the narwhal, the beluga. Those are all different kinds of whales. This particular whale, the sperm whale, is unique in that I believe it has teeth. So if it attacks you, you better watch out because you might get hurt really badly. And in this particular case, that whale was able to destroy a ship. It doesn't say specifically whether the Essex was destroyed by a sperm whale whale. But we are told about Mocha Dick, which was a giant white sperm whale, which was probably just as dangerous.
Yeah. Must have been really scary to come up against some of these enormous animals, enormous whales. Wow, they're huge. Well, after 18 months working as a sailor on a merchant ship, he worked on several ships actually, kind of got tired of it. I understand that feeling. He was struggling with being at sea for so long. It's not like he could just jump off and, go visit family when he wanted to, or, take a smaller ship and maybe paddle to the shore and, take a bus somewhere or a train. No. He was kind of tired of being at sea for so long with all these men. Of course, there were no women on the ship, and that's hard for anybody. So he jumped ship. If you jump ship, guys, it means you leave without permission. Of course, he had probably signed a contract saying he would work for so many months at some sort of salary. He wasn't supposed to leave, but he jumped ship. And they were near the Polynesian Islands at the time, and that's where he settled down for a while. Probably love that. It's very tropical there. The women are beautiful. The guys are really nice. And the food is quite tasty.
Yeah, of course, there are lots of different islands out there in Polynesia that you can check out. So that's what he did here. He was probably sick of being a prisoner in that boat. So he jumped ship and lived in the Polynesian Islands. And we'll continue talking about his exploits there in the Polynesian Islands. But right now, we're going to take a break and listen to our Chinese teacher.
Hello everyone, my name is Tina. Moby Dick 是由美国的作家 Herman Melville 所撰写而成的。我们来看一下今天文章第一段的第二个句子写着 In it, he drew on both his own experiences and the stories he heard in his youth. 这个的 draw on 是指汲取于怎么样子的故事或者是素材，他会有这样子的感想呢，是取材于自身的经验以及年轻时所听过的故事。他出生在纽约，也受过很好的教育，不过第一段的中间提到 However, he couldn't sell his work and went to sea in a merchant ship instead.然而呢，他的自己作品卖不出去，所以就只好 went to sea 乘坐这个商船出海。这里的商船我们称之为 a merchant ship。Merchant 在这里当作形容词，指的是商人的、商业的。譬如说，商业银行就可以称之为 a merchant bank。当然，同样的拼法用来当作名词，就是指商人的意思。他的父亲是木材商人，你就可以说 His father is a timber merchant. 接着来看到第一段后面的句子提到 On one of these voyages, he heard the story of the Essex, a ship that had been destroyed by a whale. 在许多的航程当中，其中一次听到了有关于这个 Essex 这艘船的故事。那么补充说明，它是一艘呢被鲸鱼摧毁的船，于是他有了这样子故事的想法。第二段的第一句提到 After 18 months, Melville, struggling with being at sea for so long, jumped ship.and lived in the Polynesian Islands. 这一句的主词是 Melville， 它的动词在后面的 jumped ship and lived 所以过了18个月呢，他其实已经很努力的待在海上很长一段时间，不过他最后还是选择跳船，其实就是离职，然后住在波里尼西亚的岛屿当中。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. We're talking about the background of our author of Moby Dick. His name is Herman Melville. He was born in America. He was actually born in the big city of New York City back in 1819. He came from a pretty wealthy family. He had a good education. He wanted to be a writer. But as a lot of writers find out, a lot of artists even today find out, you don't always get to do what you love. So he couldn't sell any books back then. It was hard to get publicity back then. You can imagine. They only had newspapers. They had no TV, no internet. Very hard to get people to see your work and read your books. So he had to make a living, and he went to sea and worked as a sailor on different merchant ships. Now, he got kind of tired of being on those merchant ships, although he did get some great ideas for his book, Moby Dick. Remember, he heard about the Essex. It was a ship that existed in real life that had been destroyed by a big whale. He also heard about a big white sperm whale named Mocha Dick. Sounds like he based his Moby Dick on these two stories that he heard while he was a merchant sailor. Now, after 18 months of sailing the seas and earning a living like that, he was kind of sick of it. So it says here he was struggling with being at sea for so long. So he jumped ship. Now, this could be figurative. You know, if you work for a company and you're tired of it, you could jump ship, which means you just leave that company before your contract's over. But here, it's actually literal. He did jump ship. He jumped off the ship and swam to a nearby Polynesian island and stayed there for a while.
Or he left the ship when it was docked there or something. He just kind of took off.
Could have, yeah.
And he spent several months there in a Polynesian island or in different islands there.
On a Polynesian island.
On a Polynesian island, indeed. Learning about the local cultures and seeing Western civilization from an outsider's point of view. So, yes, indeed, he talked to those people on those islands and said, hey, what do you think of Europe? What do you think of the United States? Well, they're this, they're that, etc. So he got that outsider's point of view. Just like sometimes, I'm not sure the name of the program now, but years ago there was a program here in Taiwan called 世界大不同, and it was quite popular because there were lots of foreigners on there. They're outsiders giving their point of view about life in Taiwan. So in this particular case, he was talking to Polynesians about their thoughts and feelings about Western civilization, and he probably learned some things that he didn't know about.
Well, at that time, also, England had a very strong military, especially their navy was very strong. And they were going and taking control of countries that didn't have a military to fight back with. I'm sure that was part of his discussion as well. So, yeah, he was getting or seeing the Western world or Western civilization from an outsider's point of view. So upon his return to the U.S., he went from whatever Polynesian island he was on back to the U.S. He then started to write stories based on his experiences. He tried again. His first book that was published was called Taipei, and it was a partly fictional account of his time on the islands. So it's not completely fiction, it's a partly fictional account. Why do I use or that guanzi? Because account is countable, people. You could say he wrote a fictional account, but here it says partly fictional. Some was true, some was not. So it was partly fictional of the time he spent on these islands. In Polynesia, it was also followed by further successes. So it sounds like his book, Taipei, was successful. And then he was able to write some more, publish some more, sell some more. And those successes established Melville among the leading literary figures of his time. So the most popular, well-known literary figures, people who are writers, and that the public was coming to know by their name and their works, he was added to that group. So he probably felt pretty successful at that point.
Yep, literary, okay. So he was recognized as a writer at the time, so he could appear on TV shows and radio shows. Of course, I was kidding, of course. But probably was written about in newspapers.
Yeah.
Or, gave speeches or whatever at universities and stuff. So here in the final paragraph, it says, Moby Dick was published in 1851. Wow, that was 10 years before the Civil War started. But this ambitious novel wasn't well received at the time. So it was ambitious, which means he tried to do a lot with this novel. It wasn't a simple story of 100 pages or 200 pages or something. It was much longer, and the writing was very unique, very detailed, very special. So lots of people probably had trouble reading it, and they weren't used to reading something like that. So it wasn't well received. People didn't really like it at that time because maybe it was too ambitious. He was trying to do too much with it.
Too complicated, perhaps? Well, I'm sure that was disappointing to him. It would be disappointing to any writer who felt like they'd done a great job on some story or novel or even some poetry. And what happened is he probably got depressed. He entered a difficult period of time that saw him give up prose and write poetry instead. There are two types of literature, guys. There's prose, which is writing in full sentences. That's what we find in books, like fictional books, or even autobiographies, nonfiction. That's prose. If you write poetry, you're writing short lines typically where the idea or the meaning of the poems are kind of hidden, a little bit tougher to figure out. Sometimes poetry rhymes, so some of the words will rhyme at the end. But he started to write poetry instead at that point, probably depressed that his prose had not been well accepted.
Maybe there was a bigger market for poetry at the time. Who knows?
There was, yeah.
And he had to get a job as a customs inspector to make ends meet. So he wrote in his free time. He wrote on the side, writing poetry. But so he had to make ends meet. He had to pay his bills, pay his rent, buy his food and stuff like that. So he had to get a job as a customs inspector. Of course, if people bring things into the country, they have to pass through customs. And so someone has to look at it to make sure you're not bringing in too much of something, or to make sure you're not bringing in any live plants or animals or drugs or things like that. So he would inspect those things to make sure they were okay. If he found something, then he would tell his superiors, and the people would get punished, etc., etc. So I guess this probably was happening in New York, Port of New York, there as a customs inspector, just to pay his bills, just to make ends meet. That's what that means, make ends meet, just to pay your daily expenses.
Yeah. Now, an inspector is someone who is kind of like a detective, especially if you're talking about inspectors who are in the UK. They don't use the word detective. They like inspector. What's that famous detective that Cumberbatch does?
Sherlock Holmes?
Sherlock Holmes, yeah. You'll often see that word inspector if you're talking about old-fashioned detectives in England. We like to say detectives. So, yeah, when he passed away at the age of 72, which was quite old for back then, he lived a long life, I think. He was thought of merely as a good writer, not a great one. So that would be tough on someone's ego or how you feel about yourself. I'm sure he thought he was a great writer. However, things changed in 1919. A century after his birth, of course, he was already gone. Others began to reevaluate his works. Probably professors or people who study literature reread his books and thought, wait a minute, this is good stuff. So you evaluate something first. If you reevaluate, you go back and look at it one more time. It was at that point that Moby Dick was praised as a masterpiece. A masterpiece is an artist's best work. And Melville is now considered to be one of the great American writers, and that's the truth.
Gee, that happens so often. These writers and artists aren't really recognized until years after they have passed away. But in any case, next time we'll continue talking about Melville, especially Moby Dick. Again, we'll talk about some of the themes and ideas. But, before we say goodbye, we need to hear from our Chinese teacher again.
接着我们来看到作者 Herman Melville 他所写的第一本书，在第二段后面的句子提到 His first book, Taipei, was a partly fictional account of his time on the islands. 那么在这里提到他的第一本书《食人岛》，其实就是他在这些岛上时光的描述，不过有一部分是属于 fictional account， 是虚构的描述。account 在这里呢，当作名词，有描述跟记述的意思。举例来说，警察叙述了交通事故的经过，就可以说 The policeman gave an account of the traffic accident. 后面的句子继续提到 It was followed by further successes that established Melville among the leading literary figures of his time.后来呢，又有在很多的作品，就让我们的作家呢被公认成为他那个时代主要的文学家之一。Literary 指的呢就是文学的，文学奖叫做 a literary prize。如果说到这个人很有文采，你就可以说他有很多的 literary talent。延伸出来，它也有精通文学的意思。比如说，我们的教授是一位文学权威，你就可以说 Our professor is a literary authority. 而接着我们来看到，在第3段提到《白鲸记》是在西元1851年出版，中间提到的句子He had to get a job as a customs inspector to make ends meet. 其实当时出版的时候并没有卖得很好，他还必须要拿到海关稽查员的工作才能够维持生计。Inspector 指的就是检察员或者是督察员的意思，来自于动词 inspect 检查。那么呢，后面的 make ends meet 则是指呢让收支平衡，那么能够维持生计的意思。今天文章的最后一句提到 Moby Dick was praised as a masterpiece, and Melville is now considered to be one of the great American writers. 白鲸记呢被赞誉为是一部杰作，而作者呢 Melville 现在也被公认为是伟大的作家之一。Consider 本来是有考虑、细想的意思，打算做什么事情，后面呢可以加上 VING 或用 WH 开头。举例来说，我已经在考虑下一步该怎么办，你就可以说 I've begun to consider what to do next. 而这里的 consider 则是解释成为把某人视为怎么样。举例来说 Michael 被认为是一位电脑专家，你就可以说 Michael is considered to be an expert in computer science. OK, 以上就是今天的课文讲解，谢谢收听。
That is it for today's lesson on literature. We talked about the author of Moby Dick today. So next time, join us again when we talk again about Moby Dick, about some of the themes and ideas in this book and why we might think you should read it. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie. Bye.
Bye.